Part 2. My wife cheated on me with my brother while I was grieving our dad's death. She got pregnant and claimed he manipulated her into the affair. What a joke. He seemed perfectly fine planning family dinners while sleeping with my wife. I keep thinking about my dad. He loved Carol like his own daughter, always told me how lucky I was to have found someone who brought out the best in me. Would he have ever imagined she would do this? That his own son would betray his brother like this? Sometimes I'm glad he's not here to see his family fall apart like this. I don't know what to do now. Every time I close my eyes, I see them together in my brother's house while I sat outside drowning in grief for our father. How do you even begin to process something like this? How do you move forward when the two people you trusted most betray you in the worst possible way? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for their support on my original post. The advice and encouragement helped me stay focused during what have been the worst 2 weeks of my life. A lot has happened since then, and unfortunately, things have only gotten worse. After staying at Jake's place for a week, I decided it was time to deal with the apartment situation. Carol had been living there alone since I left, sending me messages about how she was sorry and wanted to talk. I ignored all of them. Jake and I went to the apartment early last Saturday morning to pack up her things. I texted her the night before, telling her I'd leave her stuff outside and that she needed to be gone by the time I got there. When we arrived, the apartment was a mess, empty takeout containers everywhere, clothes scattered around, and pictures of us still hanging on the walls. It felt surreal seeing our wedding photo still displayed above the fireplace, this happy couple smiling at the camera, not knowing what was coming. I took it down first and threw it in a box. While Jake and I were packing, Carol showed up. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. She started crying right there in the doorway, saying she had nowhere to go, that her parents lived 3 states away and she couldn't afford a hotel. I didn't care. Told her she should have thought about consequences before sleeping with my brother. She tried to come inside, but Jake blocked the door, said if she didn't leave, we'd call the police. She left after that but stood in the parking lot watching us pack her things. We boxed everything up and left it outside under the building's covered entrance. I texted her that she had until 5 p.m. to collect it all, or it would go to Goodwill. Then I changed the locks. Watching Jake load box after box of our shared life together, I felt numb, 7 years of memories reduced to cardboard boxes on a curb. But that wasn't even the worst part of the week. The real bombshell dropped when my mom called Monday night. She was hysterical. Apparently, Nate had gone to see her, spinning his own version of events. He told her Carol had been pursuing him for months, even before Dad got sick. Said she would wear revealing clothes around him, find excuses to touch him, send him flirty texts. According to him, she planned the whole thing, wanted to get pregnant by him because he was more successful than me. He painted himself as this victim who succumbed to temptation after months of her seduction. Mom, who was still grieving Dad and looking for someone to blame, believed him completely. She was furious at Carol, called her terrible names, said she had destroyed our family. Mom even suggested that maybe this was for the best, that I deserved someone more faithful. I hung up on her. Couldn't believe she was buying Nate's lies. But then Carol did something I didn't expect. She went to my mom's house the next day with a folder full of evidence, text messages going back months, emails, pictures Nate had sent her. It was all there in black and white. Turned out my brother had been planning this for a long time, even before Dad got sick. He'd been making comments to Carol about our marriage, telling her she was too good for me, that she deserved someone more ambitious, more successful. When Dad got sick, he saw his opportunity. The messages showed everything, how he suggested we move in, how he made sure to be around when Carol was feeling lonely and I was grieving, how he gradually worked his way into her confidence. He would text her late at night, saying he understood how hard it must be with me being so distant. Told her she deserved someone who could be there for her emotionally. Classic manipulation tactics. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't excuse what Carol did. She still made the conscious choice to cheat, to betray our marriage vows. But finding out my brother had been plotting this, had been undermining my marriage while our father was dying on his hospital bed, it made me physically sick. I spent that whole night throwing up. Olivia called me yesterday from Seattle. She's filing for divorce after seeing Carol's evidence. She checked Nate's phone records. Turns out this wasn't his first affair, just the first time he'd gone after someone in the family. She discovered he'd had relationships with several of his female employees over the years, young, vulnerable women who needed their jobs. Olivia had caught him before, forgiven him, tried to make it work for their kids. But this was the final straw. She's already contacted a divorce lawyer. The family is completely torn apart now. Mom is devastated, keeps calling me crying about how she failed as a mother, how she should have seen what kind of man Nate was becoming. My aunts and uncles are taking sides. Some still think Nate is the victim of Carol's manipulation. They can't believe their successful, charming nephew could be so calculating. Others are disgusted by what he did, saying he's dead to them. Every family gathering turns into an argument about who's really to blame. Carol tried to reach out again, this time through her sister Amy. Wanted to show me more evidence of Nate's manipulation. Said she needed me to understand that she was a victim too. She sent screenshots of messages where Nate threatened to tell me she had been coming on to him if she tried to end things. Amy begged me to at least talk to Carol, said she was worried about her sister's mental state. I told Amy that unless it was about divorce proceedings, I didn't want to hear anything from Carol. I feel like I'm living in some kind of twisted nightmare. Every day brings new revelations, new betrayals. The brother I looked up to my whole life turned out to be a predator who targeted vulnerable women, including his own brother's wife. The woman I loved and trusted chose to betray me at my lowest point. And now I have to sit back and watch as my family tears itself apart trying to make sense of it all. Update 2. The situation has gotten even worse, if that was possible. Carol lost her job last week. Her sister Amy called to tell me what happened. Apparently, Carol had a complete breakdown at work when she found out Nate was already seeing someone else. One of her coworkers mentioned seeing Nate at a restaurant with a young woman, being very intimate. Carol started crying hysterically in the middle of a client meeting and couldn't stop. Her boss sent her home and called her the next day to say they were letting her go due to recent behavioral issues. After losing her job, Carol showed up at my apartment again. She looked awful, had lost a lot of weight despite being 4 months pregnant now. She kept saying she had nowhere else to go, that she was carrying my niece or nephew, that she needed help. I closed the door in her face. Through the door, I could hear her sobbing, saying Nate had ruined her life, that she lost everything because of him.